The first time I noticed my late husband's watch was missing from the bedroom dresser, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it during my recent move to my son Michael's house. After Robert's death 8 months ago, I'd been struggling with memory lapses. Grief does that to a person, makes you forget where you put things, makes ordinary objects seem to vanish into thin air. The 1967 Rolex Submariner had sat in the same spot for 3 years, ever since Robert became too weak from his illness to wear it. It was a beautiful piece, stainless steel with a black face, worn smooth by decades of daily use. Robert had bought it with his first real paycheck as an engineer, back when we were newlyweds, and $500 was a fortune we could barely imagine spending on something so frivolous. "It's an investment, Dorothy," he told me then, fastening it around his wrist with pride. "Good watches hold their value." I'd rolled my eyes at 25, thinking it was typical man logic, justifying an expensive toy as a practical purchase. Over the years, I'd grown to love seeing it on his wrist. It had been there for every milestone: graduations, promotions, our children's births, anniversaries. It had become as much a part of Robert as his laugh or his terrible jokes. Now it was gone from the small dish where I'd kept it since moving in with Michael and his wife Jennifer 6 months ago. "Jennifer, have you seen Robert's watch?" I asked during breakfast, trying to keep my voice casual. "The one from his dresser." Jennifer barely looked up from her phone, where she was scrolling through what appeared to be a shopping website. "Which watch?" "The Rolex. The black one he wore every day." "Oh, that old thing." She waved dismissively. "It was just sitting there gathering dust. I thought maybe it was broken or something." My heart skipped. "Where is it now?" "I have no idea. Michael might know." She returned to her phone. "Why, is it important?" "Important." As if 43 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, and Robert's most treasured possession could be summed up as simply important. "It was his favorite," I said quietly. "Well, I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere." But I had a sinking feeling it wouldn't. Jennifer had been systematically decluttering the house since I'd moved in, donating items she deemed outdated or unnecessary. Last month, it had been Robert's books. The month before, his old tools from the garage. Each time, I'd discovered the loss after the fact, when asking about something I needed or wanted to keep. "I'm just trying to make space," she'd explain. "We can't keep every little thing forever." But this wasn't every little thing. This was Robert's watch. That evening, I asked Michael about it directly. "Dad's Rolex is missing from my dresser. Do you know where it is?" Michael looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the kitchen where Jennifer was cleaning up after dinner. "Mom, are you sure you put it there?" "I'm sure. I've been keeping it in the same spot since I moved in." Maybe it got mixed up with other things when Jen was organizing. The way he said organizing told me everything I needed to know. Jennifer had taken the watch, and Michael either knew or suspected as much. "Can you ask her about it?" "Of course, Mom. I'm sure there's a simple explanation." But no explanation came. Over the next few days, I brought up the watch several more times, each inquiry met with shrugs and suggestions that I might have misplaced it, or perhaps it had been lost during the move from my old house. The dismissal stung more than the loss itself. This wasn't just any piece of jewelry, it was Robert's most prized possession, and everyone in the family knew it. The idea that it could simply disappear without anyone caring enough to help me look for it felt like losing Robert all over again. 2 weeks later, Jennifer came home from what she called a shopping therapy session, carrying several designer bags and wearing a smile brighter than I'd seen in months. "Look what I found," she announced to Michael, pulling a sleek leather purse from one of the bags. "I got it for an absolute steal at this consignment place downtown." The purse was beautiful, cream-colored leather with gold hardware, obviously expensive. Jennifer modeled it proudly, showing off its features like a game show host displaying a prize. "How much?" Michael asked, though he seemed more resigned than curious. "That's the best part. The original price was over $2,000, but I got it for just $500. Can you believe it? I had some old jewelry and things to trade in, so it didn't even cost us anything out of pocket." Old jewelry and things. My stomach dropped. "What kind of old jewelry?" I asked carefully. Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "Just some pieces that were sitting around. Nothing important." "Like what?" "Dorothy, I don't remember every little detail. Some watches and earrings and things. The kind of stuff that sits in drawers forever and never gets used. Watches. Plural. Was Robert's Rolex among the items you sold? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stopped mid-bite of his dinner, and Jennifer's face went pale. I thought it was just an old watch. It was tarnished and scratched, and you never wore it. Because it was my late husband's watch. Not mine to wear. But you weren't using it for anything. It was just taking up space. I stared at her, this woman who had sold my husband's most treasured possession to buy herself a purse, and felt something cold settle in my chest. How much did they give you for it? Jennifer looked at Michael desperately, as if he could somehow rescue her from this conversation. How much, Jennifer? $500, she whispered. The number hit me like a physical blow. Robert's watch, the one he'd saved for months to buy, the one he'd worn for over 40 years, the one that held decades of memories, had been sold for $500 so Jennifer could buy a discounted handbag. $500, I repeated. Mom, Michael said quickly, I'm sure we can get it back. We can go to the shop and... It's probably already been sold, Jennifer interrupted. These places have quick turnover. Michael shot her a look that could have cut glass. Then we'll track down whoever bought it. With what money? It probably sold for more than I got for it. These shops mark things up. The casual way she discussed the logistics of retrieving my husband's watch, as if it were a minor inconvenience rather than a devastating loss, made my hands shake with rage. I need some air, I said, standing abruptly. Mom, wait, Michael started. Let me get my purse, Jennifer said brightly, apparently thinking the crisis had passed. We can go for a drive, and I'll show you some other great shops I found. I stared at her. She was holding the cream leather purse, the one bought with money from Robert's watch, and seemed genuinely confused about why I might not want to go shopping with her. I'll go alone, I said firmly outside. I sat in my car and cried for the first time since Robert's funeral. Not just for the watch, but for what it represented. The casual cruelty of someone who could see a grieving widow's most precious possessions as nothing more than clutter to be converted into shopping money. When I'd composed myself enough to drive, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the downtown consignment district, determined to find the shop where Jennifer had traded Robert's watch for purse money. It took 3 stops, but I found it: luxury consignment and estate jewelry. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, remembered Jennifer immediately. The blonde woman with all the jewelry to sell? Yes, she was here about 2 weeks ago. Do you still have the watch she brought in? A 1967 Rolex Submariner. Patricia's expression changed. You asking about the Rolex? It belonged to my late husband. My daughter-in-law sold it without my knowledge. Oh dear. Patricia disappeared into the back room and returned with a file. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about that watch. It's already been sold. No, it's still here. But... She pulled out a magnifying glass and a small notebook. After your daughter-in-law left, I had our watch specialist examine it more closely. What we initially thought was a common vintage Rolex turned out to be something much more significant. My heart began racing. What do you mean? The serial number dates it to 1967, but more importantly, it's what we call a red Submariner, one of the first Submariner models to feature red lettering on the dial. They only made them for a short period, and examples in this condition are extremely rare. She showed me photographs she'd taken of the watch. Even in the pictures, I could see the faded red Submariner text that I'd never paid much attention to. How rare are we talking? Patricia consulted her notebook. Conservative auction estimate would be between $40,000 and $60,000. Possibly more, depending on the buyer. The number hit me like lightning. $60,000. Your daughter-in-law sold us a watch worth 50 times what we paid her for it. I sat down heavily in the chair Patricia offered. Jennifer had sold a $60,000 watch for $500 to buy a $2,000 purse for $500. The mathematics of the betrayal were staggering. What happens now? I asked. Legally, we purchased the watch in good faith from someone who presented it as her own property. But ethically? Patricia looked uncomfortable. If you can prove ownership and the circumstances of the sale, we might be able to work something out. I pulled out my phone and showed her photos from Robert's funeral, where he was wearing the watch in his casket. Photos from our anniversary last year. Photos spanning decades of the watch on Robert's wrist. "This is clearly your property," Patricia said. "Let me make some calls." I spent the rest of the afternoon in Patricia's shop, waiting while she consulted with lawyers and colleagues about the situation. By closing time, she had an answer. "We're prepared to return the watch to you at no charge, given the circumstances. Your daughter-in-law's actions appear to constitute theft, and we don't want to be part of that." "What about the money you paid her?" "That's between us and her. We made a mistake in not verifying ownership of such a valuable piece." I held Robert's watch in my hands for the first time in weeks, feeling its familiar weight and seeing my own reflection in its crystal face. But instead of relief, I felt a cold, calculating anger settling in my chest. Jennifer had stolen a $60,000 watch, sold it for $500, and used the money to buy herself a luxury handbag. She had done this while I grieved, while I trusted her family to protect what mattered most to me. But more than that, she had lied about it. Repeatedly. Even when directly confronted, she had continued to minimize and deflect, showing no remorse for her actions. That night at dinner, I sat quietly while Jennifer showed off her new purse again, explaining to Michael how smart she'd been to get such a deal. "I'm really developing an eye for quality," she said. "I can spot undervalued pieces now." I almost choked on my water. She was proud of her theft. Proud of her eye for quality that had led her to steal and sell my husband's most precious possession. "The consignment shop owner was so impressed with my finds," Jennifer continued. "She said I had a natural talent for identifying valuable pieces that other people overlooked." "Did she really?" I said mildly. "She even asked if I'd be interested in working with them as a picker, someone who finds estate sale treasures for their shop." "I'm thinking about it. We could use the extra income." Michael looked uncomfortable with his wife's enthusiasm for profiting off other people's possessions, but he said nothing. "That sounds fascinating," I said. "Tell me more about this natural talent of yours." Jennifer launched into a detailed explanation of her shopping strategy, her eye for quality, and her plans to build a side business around finding undervalued treasures. She talked about market prices, profit margins, and investment potential. All while wearing the purse bought with money from my stolen $60,000 watch. I smiled and nodded, asking interested questions and even taking a few photos of her with her new purse. Jennifer posed happily, delighted to have an audience for her success story. "Dorothy, I'm so glad you're finally taking an interest in my hobbies," she said. "I was worried you thought I was just frivolous." "Not at all," I replied. "I think your approach to finding valuable things is absolutely fascinating." What Jennifer didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have guessed, was that her great eye for quality had just provided me with everything I needed to destroy her marriage and possibly send her to prison. Because the woman who was so proud of her ability to spot undervalued treasures had just committed felony theft, and I had both the evidence and the receipts to prove it. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Frank Morrison, whom Robert and I had used for our wills and estate planning. "Dorothy, I'm so sorry for your loss. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing, Frank, but I need your help with something serious. My daughter-in-law stole and sold my husband's watch without my knowledge, and I've discovered it's worth significantly more than she received." "How much more?" "She sold it for $500. It's actually worth $60,000. Frank whistled low. "That's felony theft in this state. Have you recovered the watch?" "Yes, the consignment shop returned it when I proved ownership. They were very cooperative once they understood the situation." "Good. Do you have documentation of her selling it?" "I have her own admission, recorded on my phone. She bragged about the sale at dinner last night." "Dorothy, that recording could be crucial evidence. What do you want to do about this?" I looked across the living room at Jennifer, who was getting ready for another shopping expedition, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. I want to give her one chance to come clean voluntarily. If she refuses, I want to pursue both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for the full value of the watch. That's more than fair. Most people would have called the police immediately. She's my son's wife. I owe it to Michael to handle this as carefully as possible. After Frank and I discussed the legal specifics, I spent the afternoon preparing for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of my life. I gathered the watch documentation, printed the appraisal from Patricia's expert, and organized the photos and recordings from the previous evening. When Michael came home from work, I asked both him and Jennifer to sit down for a family meeting. "What's this about, Mom?" Michael asked, though his expression suggested he suspected. "It's about Robert's watch." Jennifer's face immediately went pale. "I thought we settled that yesterday." "We did. Which is why I went to the consignment shops today to look for it." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken at Patricia's shop, pictures of Robert's watch in the display case, pictures of the official appraisal, pictures of the documentation. "I found it," I said simply. Michael stared at the photos. "Is that Dad's watch?" "Yes. At Luxury Consignment and Estate Jewelry on 5th Street. Jennifer stood up quickly. "Well, that's great. Now we can buy it back and—" "Sit down, Jennifer." Something in my tone made her comply immediately. The shop owner was very helpful in explaining how she acquired this watch. She also had some interesting information about its value. I placed the official appraisal on the coffee table. Michael picked it up and read it, his face going white. $60,000, he whispered. "The conservative estimate, yes." Jennifer grabbed the paper from Michael's hands. "That's impossible. It was just an old watch. A 1967 red Submariner Rolex in excellent condition. Extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors." Michael looked between the appraisal and his wife. "Jen, you sold a $60,000 watch for $500. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know it was valuable?" "Because it wasn't yours to sell." Michael's voice rose. "It was Mom's property. Dad's watch. But she never used it. It was just sitting there." I pulled out my phone and played the recording from dinner the night before, Jennifer's own voice explaining her great eye for quality and her natural talent for identifying valuable pieces. "According to this recording, you knew exactly what you were doing. You were proud of your ability to spot undervalued items." Jennifer's face crumpled. "I didn't mean it that way." "Which way did you mean it, Jennifer? When you said you had a natural talent for identifying valuable pieces that other people overlooked?" Michael stood up and began pacing. "Jen, do you understand what you've done? You stole from my mother. You stole Dad's most important possession and sold it for almost nothing. I thought it was just a watch. A watch that didn't belong to you." I remained calm while they argued, waiting for the right moment to explain the full scope of Jennifer's problem. "Jennifer," I said quietly, and both of them stopped shouting. "Theft of property worth more than $500 is a felony in this state." She stared at me. "A felony? Punishable by up to 5 years in prison and restitution of the full value of the stolen property." Michael sank back into his chair. "Mom, you're not going to press charges, are you?" "That depends entirely on Jennifer's response to this conversation." Jennifer started crying. "Dorothy, please. I made a mistake. I'll pay you back the $500. The $500 you received, or the $60,000 the watch is actually worth." "I don't have $60,000. "I know. Which is why you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." I pulled out the folder Frank Morrison had prepared for me, containing all the legal documents I'd need to pursue both criminal and civil action. "You have committed felony theft. You have cost this family $60,000 through your actions. And you have violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible." Jennifer was sobbing now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Jennifer. Sorry doesn't undo theft. Sorry doesn't bring back the watch or the money you cost us." Michael looked devastated. "Mom, what do you want to happen here?" "I want Jennifer to understand the full consequences of her actions. And I want her to decide how she's going to make this right." "How can I make it right?" Jennifer asked through her tears. "First, you're going to return that purse you bought with stolen money. Today. But the store might not take it back. Then you'll sell it and give me every penny you receive." "Okay. I can do that." "Second, you're going to make full restitution for the value of the watch." Jennifer's eyes widened. $60,000? I can't. You'll figure it out. Get a loan, sell your other possessions, take on extra work. I don't care how, but you will repay every penny. That could take years. It should have taken you years to steal it, but you managed that in an afternoon. Michael intervened. Mom, be reasonable. We can't come up with $60,000. Then Jennifer shouldn't have stolen a $60,000 watch. I opened Frank's folder and spread out the legal documents. These are the papers to file criminal charges for felony theft. These are the civil suit documents for restitution. And this is a restraining order preventing Jennifer from entering my bedroom or touching any of my possessions. Both of them stared at the paperwork. I'm giving you 24 hours to decide how you want to handle this. You can agree to my terms, return the purse, make full restitution, and accept supervised access to my belongings, or I can let the legal system handle it. Jennifer looked at Michael desperately. Say something. She's your mother. And you stole from her, Jen. You stole Dad's watch and sold it for purse money. I didn't know it was valuable. But you knew it wasn't yours. I gathered up the documents. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight to give you time to discuss this privately. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., I want your decision. Where will you go? Michael asked. The Marriott downtown. I've already made a reservation. Mom, you don't have to leave. This is family. Family doesn't steal from family, Michael. Family doesn't take a grieving widow's most precious possessions and sell them for shopping money. Jennifer was still crying. Dorothy, please don't do this to us. I'm not doing this to you, Jennifer. You did this to yourself when you decided my husband's watch was yours to sell. As I packed a bag, I could hear them arguing in the living room, Michael's voice getting angrier as he fully grasped what Jennifer had done, Jennifer's voice getting more desperate as she realized the magnitude of her situation. At the hotel, I ordered room service and spread Frank's documents across the desk, reviewing my options. Jennifer had committed felony theft, and the evidence was overwhelming. Her own recorded words proved she knew she was dealing with valuable items. But more than the legal implications, I was grappling with the emotional betrayal. This woman had lived in my house for 6 months, had seen me grieve for Robert, had watched me treasure his few remaining possessions, and had decided that my sentiment was worth less than her shopping habit. My phone rang around 10 p.m. It was Michael. Mom, we need to talk. Have you made a decision? Jen wants to make this right. She's willing to return the purse and pay you back. All $60,000. A pause. She's asking if we can work out a payment plan. What are you proposing? $8,000 a month until it's paid off. I did the math quickly. That's 5 years, Michael. We'll pay interest. Whatever the legal rate is. And what happens if she defaults? What happens if you divorce? What happens if she decides this was all just a big misunderstanding? Mom, she's my wife. And she's a thief, sweetheart. She stole from your grieving mother and bragged about it at the dinner table. The line went quiet. What do you want us to do? Michael finally asked. I want Jennifer to understand that actions have consequences. I want her to take full responsibility for what she's done. And I want guarantees that this will never happen again. What kind of guarantees? Legal guarantees. A contract that makes her liable for the full amount if she ever touches my property again. A contract that makes you liable too, as her husband. Mom. She stole a $60,000 watch, Michael. She violated my trust, my grief, and my home. These aren't harsh terms, they are natural consequences. We argued for another 20 minutes, with Michael alternately defending Jennifer and acknowledging the severity of her actions. Eventually, he agreed to present my terms to his wife. And Michael? If she refuses these terms, I'll be at the police station first thing Monday morning. I understand. Do you? Because your wife committed a felony. The only reason she's not in jail right now is because I'm giving your marriage a chance to survive this. After we hung up, I sat by the hotel window looking out at the city lights, thinking about Robert and how he would have handled this situation. He'd always been more forgiving than me, more willing to assume good intentions. But he'd also been fiercely protective of family, and I knew he would have been devastated to see his most treasured possession treated as disposable clutter. The next evening, I returned to Michael's house to find Jennifer waiting with the returned purse, a check for the refund amount, and a written statement accepting full responsibility for her actions. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes red from crying. "I know sorry isn't enough, but I am truly, deeply sorry for what I did." "What exactly are you sorry for, Jennifer?" "I'm sorry for taking your husband's watch without permission. I'm sorry for selling it. I'm sorry for lying about it. And I'm sorry for not understanding how much it meant to you. And I'm sorry for spending the money on myself instead of trying to make things right immediately." I nodded. "What have you learned from this?" "I learned that just because someone doesn't use something doesn't mean it's not valuable to them. I learned that grief makes people hold on to things that might seem unimportant to others. And I learned that I don't have the right to make decisions about other people's property." "What else?" Jennifer looked confused. "What do you mean? You told me last night that you had a natural talent for identifying valuable pieces. What did you learn about that talent?" Jennifer's face flushed. "I learned that I don't know as much as I thought I did. I learned that real knowledge takes years to develop, not just a few successful shopping trips." "And what did you learn about the consequences of your actions?" "I learned that stealing is stealing, regardless of whether you intended to steal something valuable or something worthless. I learned that my actions don't just affect me, they affect Michael and our marriage and our family." It was a good answer, but I had one more question. "Jennifer, if you could go back to that morning when you took the watch, what would you do differently?" "I would ask you first. I would explain what I wanted to do and get your permission. And if I said no, then I would respect your decision and find another way to get the money for the house." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. What I saw instead was genuine remorse and, more importantly, genuine understanding of what she had done wrong. "All right," I said finally. "Here's what's going to happen." Over the next hour, we signed the legal agreements Frank had prepared, a payment plan for the $60,000, a contract holding both Jennifer and Michael liable for any future theft, and a formal acknowledgement of guilt that could be used in court if she defaulted on the payments. "One more thing," I said as we finished signing papers. "I want you to understand why this watch was so important." I showed Jennifer photos of Robert wearing the watch, pictures from our wedding day, from Michael's birth, from graduations and anniversaries and ordinary Tuesday afternoons over 4 decades of marriage. "This watch wasn't just valuable because of its price," I explained. "It was valuable because it represented a lifetime of memories. When you sold it, you sold pieces of my marriage, my history, and my heart." Jennifer cried again, but quietly this time. "I'll never touch your things again without asking." "Good. Because next time, there won't be a chance to make things right." 6 months later, Jennifer had made every payment on schedule and had begun working part-time at an estate sale company, not buying things for herself, but helping families properly value and distribute their belongings. The work had taught her to see possessions through the eyes of people who cherished them, rather than through the calculating gaze of someone looking for bargains. Robert's watch sat safely in my bedroom, in a small locked box that only I could access. Every morning, I would look at it and remember not just Robert, but the lesson it had taught about trust, consequences, and the price of redemption. Jennifer had learned that stealing is wrong regardless of intent or knowledge. Michael had learned that marriage doesn't excuse criminal behavior. And I had learned that sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is the chance to make amends for an unforgivable mistake. The watch had nearly destroyed our family. But in the end, it had also taught us all something precious about the difference between material value and true worth, and about the possibility of rebuilding trust after it's been shattered by betrayal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's education. And sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us who we really want to be. 1 year after the watch incident, our family had settled into a new normal. Jennifer made her monthly payments religiously, had developed a genuine appreciation for antiques and collectibles, and had become almost obsessively careful about respecting other people's property. But as I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing some estate planning documents, Frank Morrison raised a concern I hadn't considered. "Dorothy, I need to ask you something about Jennifer's restitution payments. She hasn't missed a single one. She's been very responsible." "That's not my concern. My concern is that she may not understand the full scope of what she sold." I looked up from the papers. What do you mean? Frank pulled out a thick file. After our conversation last year, I became curious about Robert's estate. You mentioned he had a good eye for investments and collected quality pieces over the years. He did. He always said to buy fewer things, but buy the best. So I hired an appraiser to review some of the items you've described from your house, the ones Jennifer had access to during those 6 months. My stomach dropped. What did you find? Frank opened the file, revealing photographs and appraisal documents for items I'd forgotten Jennifer had been around. Robert's fountain pen collection. His vintage cufflinks. The leather briefcase he'd carried for 30 years. Several pieces of jewelry that had been my mother's. Dorothy, based on what you've told me about missing items and Jennifer's decluttering activities, I believe the watch may not have been the only valuable piece she disposed of. I stared at the appraisals. The fountain pens alone were worth over $20,000. Robert had collected vintage Mont Blancs and Parker pens for decades. The cufflinks, which I'd assumed were costume jewelry, were actually platinum and worth $15,000. How much are we talking about, Frank? If all these pieces were sold at the prices Jennifer received for the watch, roughly 10% of their actual value, we could be looking at total losses of over $300,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000 in stolen and sold property, with Jennifer receiving perhaps $30,000 and spending it on shopping trips and luxury items she couldn't otherwise afford. What do I do with this information? That depends on whether you believe Jennifer was honest with you about the extent of her activities. I thought back to Jennifer's confession, her tears, her apparent remorse. She had admitted to selling some watches and earrings and things, but had been vague about the details. I had been so focused on Robert's watch that I hadn't pressed for specifics about other missing items. I need to go home and do an inventory, I said. Dorothy, if I'm right about this, Jennifer hasn't just committed simple theft. She's committed organized fraud on a massive scale. The legal implications are completely different. That evening, I began the heartbreaking task of cataloging Robert's possessions. Item by item, I went through the mental inventory of what should have been in our bedroom, his study, and the boxes I'd brought when I moved in with Michael and Jennifer. The fountain pens were gone. The cufflinks were gone. My mother's jewelry was gone. Robert's leather briefcase, his vintage camera collection, even his old military medals, all missing. But I also found something else, a notebook hidden in Jennifer's dresser, filled with detailed notes about the items she'd sold. Dates, locations, amounts received. She had been methodical, organized, and thoroughly dishonest about the scope of her theft. According to her own records, Jennifer had been selling my possessions for the entire 6 months I'd lived with them, taking items she assumed I wouldn't notice and converting them to cash for her shopping habits. The total she'd received, according to her notebook, $28,847. The actual value of what she'd stolen, according to Frank's appraisals, $312,000. I called Frank immediately. She kept records, Frank. Detailed records. She's been systematically stealing from me for months. Dorothy, this changes everything. This isn't a single mistake, this is organized theft. You need to call the police. What about my agreement with her? The payment plan. The payment plan was based on incomplete information. If Jennifer lied about the extent of her theft, the agreement is void. I sat in my car outside the police station for 30 minutes before going inside. Part of me still hoped there was a family solution to this problem, some way to handle it privately without destroying Michael's marriage. But the bigger part of me, the part that had been violated repeatedly by someone I'd trusted, knew that some betrayals were too serious for family solutions. Detective Sarah Williams listened to my story with growing amazement. When I showed her Jennifer's notebook and Frank's appraisal documents, she whistled softly. This is one of the most organized theft cases I've ever seen. Your daughter-in-law has been running what amounts to a fencing operation out of your home. What happens now? Now we get a warrant to search the house and arrest Jennifer for multiple counts of felony theft. Based on the dollar amounts involved, she's looking at significant prison time. What about my son? He didn't know about any of this. We'll determine that during the investigation. If he was truly unaware, he won't be charged. But if he knew or should have known about the theft, he could face charges as an accessory. The next morning, I watched from my hotel room window as police cars pulled up to Michael's house. I'd called him an hour earlier to warn him, not because Jennifer deserved the warning, but because he needed time to prepare for what was coming. "Mom, please tell me you didn't call the police," he'd said. "I found her notebook, Michael. She's been stealing from me for months. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of your father's belongings." The silence on the phone stretched for nearly a minute. "Are you sure?" She kept detailed records. Dates, items, amounts. This wasn't a mistake with one watch, this was systematic theft. "Oh God. Jennifer, what have you done?" I could hear Jennifer in the background, her voice rising in panic as Michael confronted her with the information. "Michael, you need to cooperate fully with the police. This is beyond family disputes now." "Will they arrest her?" "Yes." "What about the house? What about our life together?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I'm sorry, but Jennifer made choices that have consequences beyond what any of us can control now." From my hotel window, I watched Jennifer being led out in handcuffs, her face pale with shock. Michael followed, not in handcuffs but clearly being taken for questioning. The house we'd shared for 6 months, the house where I'd trusted Jennifer with my most precious possessions, was now a crime scene. Detective Williams called me that afternoon with an update. "Your son appears to be clean." He genuinely had no idea about the extent of his wife's activities. In fact, his shock and cooperation have been helpful to our investigation. "What about Jennifer?" "She's confessed to everything. Once we showed her the notebook and the appraisal documents, she broke down completely. She's been charged with 12 counts of felony theft, 1 count of organized retail theft, and 3 counts of fraud." "What kind of sentence is she looking at?" "With the dollar amounts involved and the organized nature of the crimes? Probably 8 to 12 years, even with a plea bargain." 8 to 12 years. Jennifer would be middle-aged when she got out of prison, her marriage likely over, her life completely derailed by her decision to treat my grief as a shopping opportunity. That evening, Michael called me. "Mom, I need to see you. Can I come to the hotel?" When he arrived, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in one day. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled, and his hands shook as he sat down. "I keep trying to understand how I didn't see it," he said. "How I lived with her for 2 years and never noticed that she was stealing from my own mother. She was very careful about it, Michael. She took things she thought I wouldn't miss immediately. But I should have known. When you asked about Dad's watch, when you mentioned other missing items, I should have put it together. You trusted your wife. That's not a character flaw." Michael laughed bitterly. "Isn't it? My wife was robbing my grieving mother, and I was so wrapped up in keeping the peace that I ignored all the signs." "What signs do you think you missed?" "The shopping sprees. Jennifer was buying things we couldn't afford, and when I asked about it, she always had explanations about sales and deals and trading old jewelry. I thought she was just good at bargain hunting." "You couldn't have known she was trading my jewelry." "But I could have asked more questions. I could have paid attention when you said things were missing." Michael looked directly at me. "I chose Jennifer's comfort over your concerns, and I'm ashamed of that." "What happens now, Michael?" "Now I figure out how to rebuild my life without the woman I thought I married. The Jennifer I fell in love with wouldn't have stolen from anyone, let alone my mother. So either I never really knew her, or she changed into someone I don't recognize." "What about the house? Your finances?" "The house will probably have to be sold. Between the legal fees, the restitution Jennifer owes you, and the fact that I can't afford the mortgage on one income, I'll need to downsize significantly." "Michael, about the restitution." "No, Mom. Don't even think about forgiving that debt. Jennifer stole over $300,000 from you. She destroyed family heirlooms that can never be replaced. The financial consequences are the least she deserves. But you'll be financially responsible too, as her husband." "Then I'll be financially responsible. Maybe it'll take me 20 years to pay you back, but I'll do it. It's better than having my mother think her son married a thief and didn't care enough to make it right." We talked until nearly midnight about practical matters, where Michael would live, how he would handle the divorce proceedings, what would happen to Jennifer's belongings. But underneath the logistics was a deeper conversation about trust, family, and how people can reveal themselves to be completely different from who we thought they were. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you glad you found out? I mean, would you rather have lived with not knowing about all the missing items? I thought about it carefully. I'm glad I found out, because it means Jennifer can't hurt anyone else this way. But I'm heartbroken that it cost you your marriage. My marriage was built on a lie. Jennifer was funding our lifestyle with stolen property. Every nice dinner, every vacation, every luxury item she bought, it was all paid for with money from your father's belongings. You didn't know that. But now I do. And I can't unknow it. 3 months later, Jennifer pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 10 years with possibility of parole in 7. The plea hearing was brief and procedural, but I attended to see her face one last time. She looked older, thinner, and completely broken. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she turned to look at me. Mrs. Sullivan, I know my apology means nothing to you now. I know I've destroyed your family and mine. But I want you to know that I understand what I did was unforgivable. I stole your memories, your husband's legacy, and your trust. I turned your grief into my profit, and I will live with that shame for the rest of my life. She paused, tears streaming down her face. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope someday you can find peace knowing that I will spend every day of my sentence thinking about what I took from you and wishing I could undo it. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in state prison and ordered full restitution of $312,000 plus interest and court costs. Jennifer would be 52 when she was released, and she would spend the rest of her life paying back the money she had stolen. After the sentencing, Michael and I stood in the courthouse parking lot, both of us emotionally drained. Is it over now? He asked. The legal part is over. The healing part will take longer. Mom, I want you to know that I understand now why you called the police. I was angry at first, thinking you should have given her another chance. But she had already had 6 months of chances, and she used every one of them to steal from you. I didn't want to destroy your marriage, Michael. You didn't destroy anything. Jennifer destroyed it when she decided to use our home as a base for stealing from my mother. 6 months after Jennifer's sentencing, Michael moved into a small apartment across town and filed for divorce. The house sold quickly, with most of the proceeds going toward Jennifer's restitution debt. Michael kept working overtime to pay down what remained, determined to clear the debt as quickly as possible. We had dinner together once a week, slowly rebuilding our relationship without Jennifer's presence between us. The conversations were different now, more honest, more direct, with none of the careful politeness that had characterized our interactions when he was trying to keep both his wife and his mother happy. I've been thinking about dating, Michael told me one evening over dinner. That's good. You're too young to be alone forever. But I'm terrified of trusting someone again. How do you know if someone really loves you or if they're just using you? You pay attention to how they treat people who can't do anything for them. You watch how they handle other people's possessions, other people's feelings, other people's vulnerabilities. Jennifer seemed loving for the first year. She was sweet to you when you moved in. She was sweet to me when she thought I had nothing worth taking. Once she realized I had valuable possessions and no one monitoring her access to them, her behavior changed. So the real Jennifer was the one who stole from you. The real Jennifer was someone who could steal from a grieving widow and feel proud of her cleverness. The sweet Jennifer was a performance she put on when it served her purposes. Michael nodded thoughtfully. The woman I'm seeing now, she's a social worker. She makes about a third of what Jennifer made, but when I told her about what happened with you, her first question was whether you'd recovered all your husband's belongings. She sounds like someone who understands what matters. She also insisted on meeting you before we got serious. She said she couldn't be with someone whose family relationships were built on secrets or conflicts. Smart woman. She is. And she treats everyone the same way, respectfully, kindly, with genuine interest in who they are. It's completely different from Jennifer's charm, which was always calculating and conditional. 2 years after the watch incident, I received an unexpected letter from Jennifer in prison. She had been working in the prison library, helping other inmates with legal research and literacy programs. The letter was carefully written, thoughtful, and completely different from the entitled woman who had once lived in my house. Mrs. Sullivan, It began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing not to ask for anything, but to tell you about some things I've learned during my time here. I've been working with women who committed crimes out of desperation, mothers who stole food for their children, women who turned to drugs after losing everything, people who made terrible choices because they had no good options. Being around them has shown me how privileged my position was and how inexcusable my choices were. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't feeding hungry children or trying to survive. I was just greedy and entitled, and I convinced myself that your possessions didn't really matter because you weren't using them the way I thought they should be used. I've also been learning about grief counseling, because I wanted to understand what you were going through when I was stealing from you. I now realize that I was taking advantage of your vulnerability at the worst possible time in your life. I can't undo what I did. I can't bring back your husband's belongings or the memories attached to them. But I can promise you that I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who would never hurt another person the way I hurt you. I'm not asking for forgiveness or response. I just wanted you to know that your decision to hold me accountable probably saved other families from experiencing what you went through. The woman who stole from you doesn't exist anymore, and she will never hurt anyone again. With deep remorse and respect, Jennifer." I read the letter several times, then put it away in the box with Robert's watch. Not because I forgave Jennifer, but because it represented the end of the story, the acknowledgement that actions have consequences, that trust once broken requires years to rebuild, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses. Michael married his social worker girlfriend in a small ceremony 2 years later. During his wedding speech, he thanked me for teaching him the difference between love and manipulation, between supporting someone and enabling their destructive behavior. "My mother could have covered for Jennifer's theft to protect my feelings," he said. "Instead, she held all of us accountable to the truth. That decision cost me a marriage built on lies and gave me the chance to build one based on honesty." Robert's watch sits on my dresser now, in the same spot it occupied for 40 years. But next to it sits a small frame containing a photo from Michael's wedding, a picture of him dancing with his new wife, both of them laughing with genuine joy. The watch reminds me of what I lost when Robert died. The photo reminds me of what I protected when I refused to let Jennifer's theft go unpunished. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the example of someone who knows their own worth and won't accept less than they deserve. Jennifer learned that stealing has consequences. Michael learned that marriage requires choosing partners worthy of trust. And I learned that even in grief, even when vulnerable, I was still strong enough to defend what mattered most. The vintage Rolex was worth $60,000. But the lesson it taught was priceless, that respect is earned through behavior, that trust is fragile and precious, and that sometimes the most expensive mistake someone can make is underestimating the person they are stealing from. In the end, Jennifer didn't just lose her freedom and her marriage. She lost the chance to be part of a family that could have loved her unconditionally, if only she had been someone worthy of that love.